Hey everybody, this is Zoned In 87 coming straight at you from the chat. I wanted to make this video since Artie called me out on some of the stuff I had said. He immediately basically said that am a worse caster and that I don't know as much as him and that he's much smarter than I am, and I do not disagree. But the argument isn't about who knows more or anything of that nature. The only thing that I want to do is point out a couple of his mistakes that I have told him in the past that he just automatically writes off as it's not a problem. The problem with that line of thinking when you are so smart is that you can never take advice because there is so much advice out there that about 90% of the time, 99% of the time, it's going to be wrong. But there is that 1% chance that the people in the chat do know what they're talking about, and maybe you will want to try something new in order to get over that hump. And so this is what this VOD is about. It has nothing to do with my casting skills, my knowledge, or anything of that nature. It has a lot to do with logic, what is efficient, and what he needs to prioritize. These are things that like for example, a coach isn't going to beat a pro player. Artie is not going to beat a pro player. There are scenarios where Artie knows more than a pro player does because he understands the matchup and so on. And this is the same thought process. I am a person who sees errors. I am not as good as Artosis. I do not claim to be as good as Artosis. But there are things that are very obvious to anybody with a simple sense of logic. So, we're going to go ahead and watch this game, and we're going to stop a couple of different spots and just kind of go over where he makes his mistakes, what he could have done, and how to prioritize what he needs to be doing. Because in StarCraft, that is one of the most important skills out of everything. Once you get your macro going and your micro and you understand what counters what, figuring out what your priorities need to be, no matter how good or how much you know about StarCraft, not being able to distinguish between two things that are similarly important and weighing your options has nothing to do with how good you are. It has a lot to do with just simple logic, taking a step back, listening to other people, and trying to evaluate the situation once you're out of the game. As a player, it's very hard to do it in the moment. And when Artosis said he played a perfect game up until the end, up until his mistake, I think that is completely incorrect, as his macro was sufficiently lacking, his decision making was lacking, his priorities were lacking. So, up until now, I'm sure there's errors, small errors here and there. That isn't what I'm concerned about. For example, in most of his games, he actually has a poor split for an S player. That's just a fact. If you mess up your split and you're on the level of splitting SCVs like a silver player, you should work on that. He messes up his split. Tastosis messes up his split. It's not acceptable. That's something that he could have fixed in one day and never have to worry about it again. So, that would be my number one thing of advice, is just to say, hey, have you ever had a problem with your splits? I think you split well this game. Let's move on to the next thing. That isn't to say it isn't a problem in future games or other games. He's done everything well so far. It's getting that bunker up, putting the SCVs out in front. I think you do want to keep that vulture back. I don't mind any sort of miss micro here, as this is a very, very tough situation. That isn't what we're concentrating on. We're not concentrating on micro here. We're concentrating on decision making, macro, and things of that nature. So we're getting way ahead here. He sends his SCVs back, which is great. Keeps 4 here. Needs to get a SCV down there as soon as possible, I believe, in order to expand here so that he can get ahead. He gets it in time, which is great. Gets it on time, and that's huge. Everything's going very well so far. If he wanted to say he played perfect up until this point, that's a totally fine statement.
Heptagon 24 cheered. X300, see, look at this poor Protoss. He just wanted to make an Exus.
I'm liking everything I'm seeing.
Even expanded his own expansion because his race is trash.
And the problems with Artosis aren't the early game. It's all about the late game in TVP where he loses and he could win the matches easily. I also am not like the other commentators who I think where they're like, oh, you need to be pushing, you need to be ending the game. I particularly agree with Artosis in the sense of, you know, if you don't have the micro skills to do it, if you're not Flash, you're probably going to overextend, as it is an extremely hard thing to do in order to end the game as a Terran going mech. The command center is about to finish up here. I really like how he places his units right near those mines. That's great. Or right behind the mines, that is. His transfer is definitely late here. So if we're going to go ahead and maybe start rewinding the video here. There are things in StarCraft that are much more important than everything else. Getting the command center up, every second matters. Absolutely every second matters. And he could have right there. There's several instances where his command center is finishing up and he has not transferred yet. That's fine, but it is a mistake. He needs to have transferred before that CC finishes. Let's just count the seconds. 1 second, 2 seconds. Oh wait, no, it's not finished yet. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 seconds late on that transfer. Notice here, he also does this a lot. When he transfers his SCVs, he will click the same mineral patch as he's basically sorting them out. So he'll click that one twice, which does absolutely nothing. It's as if that action was completely a waste of time, and he needs to be basically sorting them because it's very important to do. He could have done that last one a little bit better, split it one more time to that top patch. All in all, not that big of a mistake, but still a mistake. Sorted just fine for the most part, but very small, minor things that can be fixed and should be fixed. I also think that a lot of times he does transfer too few SCVs to the natural. I think a lot of times you will want to transfer maybe one or two more SCVs than Artosis does transfer. He might want to go and look at the math on that, but I do like personally where your natural minerals are going to expire, or sorry, your main is not going to expire so much before your naturals. I think that is a very powerful thing to transfer one or two more SCVs than he normally does. But that's just a personal opinion. That is a personal sort of preference, and if he wants to transfer that amount of SCVs, that's totally fine as well. Again, these are not big sort of mistakes or anything like that. All the big mistakes do happen later in the game.
I just want to point out when it happens. 1 in 256, it's like, yeah, let's not get that probe. Just leave it.
I think that he also does a lot worse when he gets tilted, as well as he also talks. Um, you know, not a big issue or anything like that, but I personally, if I were coaching him, I would say try to not talk and have those sort of rage outbursts in the middle of the game. I think that he absolutely needs to take it completely serious at this level of play. That's also why he was challenging me to a game. I'm not saying that I'm better than him. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying that that he's better than any pro, but he can't give a pro advice. He certainly can. That's not my point, or that's not what needs to be taken away.
I see your base. I'm double expanding.
Now, there's a couple different things that we can do in this scenario, and what Artosis wants to do is he wants to get better in the long term. So what he's not going to do is basically try to end the game early. If his micro was very good, I would say that he might want to lean in on that. I don't believe that his micro is that great compared to the average S rank player. So in order to end this game early may be a mistake. His macro's going fine so far, but it will soon fall apart around 140 supply or so.
David R. Swings cheered. X400, I finished constructing my perfect
Everything's looking great. I have no problems with any of this.
for the stream delay and then what?
And I don't think that that there is any sort of I don't believe there's any I don't have any problems with any of his early game stuff, as I mentioned before. So there isn't too much to say here that I would change.
Donated $3. How much for you to not skip spam donos for the rest of the stream?
No.
Yeah, so everything's looking good so far.
So he has 3 base, like 10 gates, and Arbiter tech. After I bust him.
I'm not sure why Artosis thinks that that needs to be said. In particularly because, I mean, he is giving him that room because most Terrans aren't able to attack right here and end the game. So he can be that greedy, right? Obviously, the Protoss does not know that he's not going to attack again. I'm just saying that if the Protoss is going to be that greedy and go multiple different tech routes, then you got to punish it, right? Or else it's, in essence, not being greedy if the Terran player on average can't stop it. So as soon as Artosis starts microing his vultures a little bit too much, that's when we're going to see a giant dip in his productivity. I think everything's looking great so far. He's got his minerals and gas at a reasonable amount. He's got his buildings up. He's got enough factories for now. His transfers again late, unfortunately. He sends 12 SCVs from the main, which is, I think I like that decision instead of sending any from the natural. And that's why I would have sent a couple more SCVs to the natural in the beginning, just so that we have a little bit more of an even distribution on the minerals. Again, that is personal preference, however. On the third, usually you don't need to be splitting your SCVs because you need to know what you're capable of, and if you don't have that APM, it is not worth it at this point in time.
watch lots of Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. My favorite Pokemon is now
Looks great here. This is where Artosis believes he made the mistake. He thinks he should have stayed up here, which is, I don't disagree. You really don't want to get surrounded as the Terran player ever. And if you're able to stay up here, you just basically can't get surrounded because you can lay mines on each side and then send in reinforcements from the bottom, and you basically win. I think we should have probably sent a couple SCVs with each push here and just start building missile turrets. There's really no reason not to. Oh, and he did. Okay, that's great. Did not see those down there. He's going to start pushing in hard. We see where the Protoss is, and I think he should have been a little bit more cognizant of the movement of the Protoss prior to it just showing up. But everything's acceptable so far. I do not like the vultures tanking here. I would like for them to have fought more closer to the tanks, because we cannot afford to lose these vultures like this with the amount of zealots that are out. He gets obviously sandwiched from behind, and that is where he thinks he made the mistake, which I agree. So I don't think the game is lost here. The game is lost right afterwards of what's going on. So he's floating 2,000 minerals and 1,000 gas. This is where the game truly is lost. Once he has lost these troops, what he instead decides to do is he decides to spend all of his time microing his vultures, which isn't a bad move, but what you first need to do here is prioritize. Your number one priority is spending the 2,000 minerals and 1,000 gas. He could be making a CC right now, as well as tanks and vultures, instead of microing these vultures. He should have sent them across, done that, done a macro round, built a CC, and then continued the game. If he does that, the game is, I believe he's in a good spot, even though the Protoss has dramatically outgrown him, because he is good at defending, he's good at setting up tanks, and he's also good at macroing without microing at the same time. So here is the problem. How many vultures does he have queued up? We're going to stop this here. And this is my entire point. I brought this up to Artosis before. His macro is god-awful. He has 4 vultures queued on 1 vulture queued on 2, and then let's go ahead and see what else he macros up here. He's got 0 on this one, and he's got 2 on the other. Didn't build any tanks, floating 1,300 and 800 gas. So instead of microing these vultures here, what I would have preferred is to have an even distribution of vultures, spend all of his money, because he absolutely can't do 2 things at once, even though he thinks he can. And what he will say here is that he basically wants to get better, and that's not how you do it, even though the pros do it. He's not as good as the pros. He doesn't have as much APM. He wants to get better, but what he needs to do here is spend all of his minerals, apply them to all the appropriate factories in an even amount, not one's queued up 5. He needs to spend 5 more seconds macroing here. That is just the amount that is an error on his part, and he doesn't realize it, and he thinks he's playing perfectly right now, is he's too stuck in his ways, and he's not going to change, because he isn't. I've mentioned this multiple times to him, and it has nothing to do with my skill level. It has everything to do with just common sense. What is the most important thing right here? Getting the minerals spent, and then microing these vultures here. That's what he needs to do. He could have built a CC this entire time, which he needs to do. He needs to build a CC, needs to build a CC, needs to build a CC. Everything is more important than this right now. He can build a CC, come in here, kill these cannons, kill the probes, and he needs to spend, again, a couple more seconds here. He's got a lot of stuff, a lot of minerals floating. He can queue up multiple vultures. I would say 3 vultures in each, 2 or 3 tanks in each. Build a couple more supply depots because he will need it. As you can see here, we'll see how long he's stuck on 158 supply. Being supply stuck at 158 supply for 30 seconds or 1 second is not acceptable. It's just such a huge... It's the reason why he loses every late game TVP, and he just won't fix that problem. And again, I have nothing against Artosis. We want him to win. We see issues, but he doesn't want to fix it. I mean, I'm the same way. I hear somebody who has an opinion, and I think I'm smarter than them, so I don't listen. How many tanks does he have queued up there? 5? I just rewound it 5 seconds. Let's see here. Can we see this? Hopefully we can see how many tanks he's got queued up on 1. So he's got 5 and 2. That's not good. Like, at least build, if you're going to queue up 5, that's fine. You have the amount of minerals. Queue up 5 on this one as well. Then you won't need to come back and do another round when you're going to click on both again. If you just queue up 2 more here, that'd be great. I'd be more happy with 4 tanks queued up, 4 tanks queued up, than him just coming back every cycle to make 1 while he's floating 2,000 minerals. Again, he could have made many more vultures. He's got 1,600 minerals floating. Get it down. Queue up 5 if you need to in order to get those minerals down. Start building some supply depots after these turrets. This is all such a waste. He killed 1 probe for 6 seconds where he could be macroing. I know this sounds really harsh, guys. I understand that. I think that at this point in time, though, macro is what is crucial, what you need to be focusing on, not killing 2 probes with 5 vultures here. That's going to take you 15 seconds to do. I'm fine with all this laying, but again, his priorities aren't right. He needs to be macroing. He needs to be making supply depots, and then he can, as well as the CC, and then he can continue everything else that he's doing right here. This is great here that he does get these vultures in, and maybe he doesn't get these in if he does stop for a couple more seconds because he's got the tempo with the vultures. But he's already lost the game, honestly. You can't be microing with 2,500 with 118 supply. Where is his win condition here? The guy has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bases, building a 6th and possibly a 7th right now as he's killing 20 probes for 20 of his own supply. I mean, he doesn't have a win condition because the game's over. If this was all in supply right now, he can go ahead and take this high ground, make a CC. There's a lot more things that he can have at his disposal. However, he's already lost the game, but he does still had a chance if he macros correctly. He has queued 1 single unit on all these factories. All he needs to do is double queue, get his minerals down, then he can micro a lot heavier and not have to come back to his base every single 1 unit. So he's finally making that CC. It's a little bit late. I would even say build a second CC here, take both bases at the same time. You're going to be mining out very soon on both your natural and your main. And I think that would be very nice. He also mismicros his vultures here. We all see this mine in the middle of the screen. We all know Artosis can see this. For some reason, he gets upset that he gets hit by his own mine, even though he knows exactly how it's going to get off. I'm sorry, it's this other mine, I believe. Oh no, it must be a different time he goes in. There are also a few different types of Protosses in the world. The ones that like to recall on your army, the ones that like to sandwich you, and the ones that like to recall in your base. This Protoss really has no thoughts of going into his base, especially later in the game, where Artosis leaves a tank and basically this is all fine right here, but later in the game he should recognize that this Protoss has no intention of going into his main base in order to win the game. What this Protoss is going to do is he's just going to stop him getting a fourth, and that is the Protoss's win condition. Still floating 2,100 gas. Guys, I can't stress it enough. Spend the fucking money. Spend it. Spend it. If Artosis thinks this is okay, he does not understand why he's losing, because he doesn't. And I think this is the mine, by the way. Let's just watch this mine. Did he really think that he wasn't going to get hit by that? I mean, we all make mistakes, but like, he was upset. He was upset there. Again, instead of, he could have spent one more second to double queue everything here, would have spent all his money. He needs to transfer his SCVs as quick as possible before the CC lands, which he also has not done in any of these expansions yet. The priorities here are not make a SCV, not make a supply depot and an add-on. He needs to get SCVs to this expansion as fast as humanly possible before it even landed, and we got 30 seconds of it not mining for free for some reason. He's still not transferring. There's nothing more important than transferring SCVs right here, besides maybe macroing. This, I mean, it's still not being. Guys, I don't know what to say here. It's just, how do you think what is your win condition? You're at 160 supply. You could be at 200 easily. I'm confused. I don't know how he thinks he can't transfer for about 2 minutes straight and thinks he played a perfect game. We could see the army movement, and we could also scan around and see where he's positioning his arbiters. We can have a couple units down towards the bottom to see if he is thinking about coming into the base. He is supply blocked heavily for a long time at 168 supply, which normally happens to him every single PVT. And it is frustrating as the viewer, as we can all see this coming. I do think that he may need a couple more Goliaths each round. I see a lot of pros really diving into the Goliaths whenever there are arbiters. So I think he always goes a little bit light on Goliaths, even though we all recognize them being very weak against ground. They are very great against observers and arbiters, which really need to be targeted, as well as shuttles. So that's just, again, another personal preference. I would get a couple more Goliaths if that were me. Again, I wouldn't be able to play as well as Artosis. I don't have as high as APM. But other than that, I think we could all recognize where his mistakes are. He's finally at 200 supply. That's great. He definitely should get a fourth minutes before this, or up to 10 minutes ago when he was getting his third. This way, he could have transferred all those SCVs down towards the south while pushing the north. I mean, there's a lot of things that he can kind of do here. But if he's not going to get a fourth now, he's not going to get a fourth later, guys. He could have been at 200 supply minutes ago. He still could be at 200 supply. So he's going to go back in for another round. We got 0 factories blinking, I believe. Oh, we have 1 factory blinking with 4 vultures queued up. And I'm also just starting to hate the sound of my own voice because I sound like a broken record here, guys. It's an issue. At this point in time, I do think that this tank here can be moved. He's got enough mines in his base. And instead of just leaving it there for the whole game, I think I would move it out at this point in time. Not a big issue, but it's going to stay there until the end of the game and never have a use. So that's just few supply down. That happens each fight. We got to recognize what type of Protoss this is. This Protoss hasn't fished at all in order to see if there's openings. He hasn't brought his arbiters down towards the south yet, except for this one. But we already have EMP, so that's not as much of an issue anymore. I do think that Artosis does need a couple more science vessels as quickly as possible, just because of he's got an EMP and he is a little bit higher in gas currently. Could have EMP this entire army, possibly, and cleaned it up. What's going to happen, he leaves this army here. He could have had mines there when he took his 4th base, and that would have been a little bit easier of a cleanup for him. However, that army's just going to stay there and then sandwich him as soon as he tries to do anything. So there's just no possibility of getting a 4th base right now. Great EMP here. It actually doesn't matter because the game's already over. So the Protoss, with only having 1 science vessel this entire time, goes for stasis. There's so many things that Artosis needs to do, including whenever you're at 200 supply. I also talked to Artosis about this. Whenever you're at 200 supply, what you absolutely need to do is queue multiple things in the factory so that you never dip below this 200 supply if you have an excess of minerals. So you queue as much as you possibly can because it will automatically make the next unit and not say you are currently supply blocked. So it'll always be in that queue as long as you already have something queued in there. So Artosis would win. He would gain 100 MMR, no doubt, against Protoss if he did this. He just refuses to do it. This isn't a question. This has nothing to do with skill level. It's just a fact. He gets sandwiched here. He has way too few units here. They're really not doing anything either because he's never going to take a base because it's already too late. So this is just a weak outpost that serves no purpose. And he just lost way too many units there. Again, he just has already lost. I think he may possibly be able to save some of these units, maybe? Over on the right-hand side? No, it looks like the Protoss is properly camping it out correctly. Yeah, there's nothing he could do to save those. I thought he just never looked at it when we were watching the first time around. But now seeing it, yeah, there's no way of saving that. The Protoss has way too many bases at this point in time. You can't win off of the amount of bases and supply that he currently has. And this is just an uphill battle from here. Again, just lacking in the science vessel production. We have 1,600 gas that we have floating. We could have had an amount of science vessels flying everywhere. We're not going to have to rely on scans and utilizing that micro. We can utilize that somewhere else. We can also get these EMPs down. defense matrices, and so on. And I believe his upgrade just finished. His 2-1 just finished. So if we had that fourth a lot earlier, we would have been able to hold it with mines. He's pushing up here. While this all looks nice, he's going to get sandwiched and the game's over. He has 182 supply. He's going to lose his whole army and have nothing to replace it with. So let's go ahead and fast forward here, because the game is essentially over.
So much.
He's got 2,000 minerals here, but he's taking the amount of time to kill these 4 dragoons. Yeah. I know he knows the game's over, but let's all get in good habits here and spend those minerals. Maybe stop microing a little bit so hard, and let's win some TVPs moving forward. I have nothing against Artosis. I hope he wins. We all want to see him win. The things that I want him to fix, though, is the only thing that I have told him in the past that he needs to do. He needs to queue up, not get supply blocked at 150. He needs to spend a little bit more time on his macro, and then once he gets to around 200 supply, he gets that 4th base up as well, because he had so many extra minerals he could have floated that down at any time. Transfers his naturals workers over there while setting up some mines. Once he gets around 200 supply, I want him to queue up on every factory that he can, multiple units, and there is nothing more important than staying at 200 supply, because if he's able to do that, I guarantee that he will win all of these matches that he would have lost at this rating. I absolutely guarantee that he would have destroyed this Protoss if he just fixes his one macro mistake. That's it. That's all I have to say. I hope he does it. I hope one of these days he learns, or else he's just going to continue on his current path and never learn from it, and just saying he wants to become better without actually becoming better. The pros do it. I've seen Flash do it. When the game becomes so big and they can't keep up with the micro and the macro at the same time, they queue up multiple units. So where Artosis is at, he has a much lower APM than most players, I would say, at his current skill level, but he makes up for that with intelligence and knowing what to do and what counters what. He isn't going to get faster. He's going to stay the same speed. In order to fix his macro mistake, spend a little bit more time on that, get that queued up correctly, get all his minerals spent, and then while his units are dying, they will basically start production anyway, and he can even focus a little bit more on micro because of that. So Artosis, I hope you watch this video. I don't think you will have lasted about 40 minutes, but this is a coaching video. This has nothing to do with my casting abilities, how good I am, or if I want to challenge you. I want you to become better, and if you do that, I promise you, you will. Thanks.